Welcome back everyone to another YouTube video. Today we're going to be talking about Aether of Night, a book by Brandon Sanderson that's been overlooked for years, largely as a result of two reasons. One, because it was never published, and two, because Sanderson asked for discussion about it to be discreet. Normally, to receive a copy of this unpublished book, you'd have to get in contact with the mods of the website 17th Shard. Those mods would then send you a copy with an attached note from Sanderson asking that readers not discuss the book openly on any forums, as it's an unpublished novel and still in draft stage. Until recently. After having Tress of the Emerald Sea be published, Sanderson stopped including those notes about not discussing Aether of Night. A notice was nowhere to be found when I received my copy. It's likely he doesn't want to discourage people from theorizing about Aethers, which are featured prominently within Tress, as well as the fact that he recently gave out Way of Kings Prime, another unpublished novel, as part of his leather-bound Kickstarter. I suspect that in the near future, Aether of the Night will accompany Words of Radiance leather-bound Kickstarter. Regardless, if I am alerted to the fact that I have misunderstood and that this book is not to be discussed, I will of course delete this video out of respect to the author's wishes. With that out of the way, let me just start by saying this book is an uncut gem. I'm going to walk you through the first few chapters before diving into more depth about my thoughts on the book. This video will have some Cosmere spoilers as I explore the themes that Sanderson took from this book and implemented elsewhere, so small spoiler notice. Immediately in the prologue, Decay, the character Sanderson would later rename and reuse as Ruin, is introduced to us, having just trapped someone who appears to be a god. Decay admits to also trapping the individual's brother, immediately setting up a rivalry theme and duality, as we see in Mistborn. Over to chapter 1, we're introduced to our main protagonist, Wraith, who, despite being the Emperor's firstborn son, is a priest. He's working on painting and poetry to bless his two brothers' upcoming engagements. Parts of this religion can be seen back in Mistborn, when Sazed spoke about a religion that uses arts as a form of worship. Wraith's likable young brother, Darrow, shows up and takes him away for a special yearly celebration. The only day of the year where Wraith can shed his priest robes and become a prince once again. They travel using a machine that relies on a pretty unique magic. One of the royal lines controls a special aether that lets the user become one with an object. Not unlike a fabrial, the soul then powers this object. In return, the user obtains a unique kind of immortality as they're meshed together with this object. We meet fellow protagonist Dana, who is the love interest and potential bride for the next emperor. She's been sent here from a rural kingdom and is wowed by the city. Her reactions are very, very similar to Ciri from Warbreaker. Then we are introduced to the race Gol, which is a race we've not seen before in the Cosmere. They're large and hairy with arms that reach the floor, but are usually gentle and love admiring art. So the main event of chapter 2 is seeing the Amberite Aether in action. Aether exists on people's hands and appears to be biological. Different people can draw upon different amounts of Aether. Wraith does not have very much natural strength with it and can barely summon a crystal sword. Meanwhile, his brother Darrow can summon an entire suit of crystallized armor and a shard blade sized sword. The weight isn't an issue for the user, and it will grow back after being chipped. After disconnecting from the host or being dismissed, the crystal turns into a fine red powder. We see all this happen as Wraith's older brother Hearn, the heir of the Emperor, almost kills him using his Aether as a show of supremacy. After that, we get to see the Sending, a type of magic that priests perform on living creatures, along with what they're carrying, to transport them vast distances. However, it's described as a very unpleasant experience. They're all transported to the fringes of the nation, to the ruins of an ancient city where the ceremony is supposed to take place, as well as the bride choosing. It's all done over a pool of black liquid that's said to kill on touch. In the next chapter, the inciting incident occurs, as forms suddenly appear from the evil-looking pool of liquid. The Emperor gets dragged off into the dark pool. The black liquid then also splashes onto Wraith, but doesn't kill him. And then, unseen by him, the creatures also drag off his brother Hearn. We see the Aethers in more action. Each one seems to do something different. Verdant is very much like what we see in Tress, summoning vines to grapple things. It seems the Aethers also have a will, as Dana notes that hers feels tired after overuse. The black liquid appears to be Midnight Aether, something we've seen in two different canon places. Once, more recently in Tress, where we saw it used and controlled to create creatures, by her and the witch. But also, we see it another time in Dalinar's vision, where he helps fight off one of these creatures on Roshar. At the end of the battle, they're all sent back home using the sending magic, and Wraith is convinced by his brother Darrow to secretly take the place of his fallen twin brother Hearn. He is then thrust into a position where he must command troops against this new evil, while also having to compete with Hearn's terrible reputation that he's created. Now, if all of this sounds interesting, I highly recommend messaging 17th Shard and asking for a copy. I've only covered the first 4 chapters, and this thing is 29 chapters and 150,000 words long. But it's fast-paced, though. I started reading on a flight and finished it on the same flight. It's far from one of Sanderson's best works, but I also wouldn't call it his worst. It's the kind of book for someone who has read everything else Sanderson's ever written, and is still starved for more. It's similar quality to that of Elantris or Warbreaker, however not nearly as polished as either. Personally though, I enjoyed it more than either of those 2 books. Now I'm going to jump into some thoughts that will spoil the ending of the book, so if you want to read the book, and you don't want to hear these thoughts, run now. 3, 2, 1... Okay, everyone gone? First, some quick thoughts. I expected Darrow to get a beast bond, to get a new arm. That would have been a way to introduce multiple Aethers to the public, something that Wraith said time and time again that he wanted to do. It baffles me that he didn't do this. Next, I love that the church was secretly evil. It's not something I ever really expected from a Sanderson novel. In Mistborn we had Inquisitors, but those guys were so obviously evil dudes. They had giant metal spikes piercing their skulls. But here, every single member of the church's upper priests and clergy were corrupt and evil and posing as good guys, who even advised Wraith. I only wondered briefly about why Wraith was chasing a different lead instead of asking the church about how they bond. But I still didn't expect them to be evil. It's just not Sanderson's style. In that way, even though the hints were overwhelmingly there, it was still a subversion of my expectations, which I really liked. However, I did want Wraith to at least reveal himself to the priests. A lot of that ending felt rushed, even though it was a really nice twist. I love the races. I wish we saw more of the goal beyond those 2 scenes. I like that they were created for war, but corrupted by love. That's such an amazing concept. I hope that there are canon races in the Cosmere and that we get to see more of them. They remind me a bit of the Ogier from Wheel of Time. I might make a separate video all about the interesting races in this book. I don't think this story is quite as unpublishable as Sanderson believes. I actually really loved it, and I'm pretty critical. He mentioned that this book feels like 2 different stories that don't mix well, but I think I know why, and I want to dive into that real fast. The biggest issue is that the female lead's story is completely dependent on Wraith. She needs to have her own revelations in conjunction to Wraith to help further the plot. I would advise moving her more to the monastery side of the plot, discovering more about the Aethers and the foreign magic. This especially makes sense if she believes there's another place to get the forbidden Aether Bud within the city. I would also suggest giving her an actual enemy and stakes, putting her up against the other brides perhaps, and having her failure mean something. Wraith spends this whole book growing and building friendships and learning. She kind of befriends one girl, but sort of just tacked on at the end. It's not a natural growth. Other than that, she just befriends Wraith. I also expected her grandfather to be one to reveal who they got the bud from, since he was foreshadowed to have traveled the world, but that's a smaller nitpick. I would also recommend giving Darrow more of a part to play in the plot, perhaps giving him the responsibility of choosing his brother's bride. He could act as a bridge between the 2 plots. Darrow is an interesting character, and he felt a bit wasted to me. There are a few plot conveniences at the end and some holes with what's going on with the gods of the world, but I think those things would be fixed up with just some editing passes. With these changes, I think that the book actually could really come together. Wraith's plot and growth was already excellent and engaging, and the world building is some of Sanderson's best. Okay, so that's an overview of Aether of Night and a few of my thoughts on the novel. I might make more content on the book later, exploring the really fascinating lore, magic, and creatures in this book. For now though, let me know your thoughts about the novel down below. I'm really interested to see what people have to say about this novel. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one. Alright, bye bye, see you.